All right, we're going to keep it going, man. This video right here, this is about redlining and racial covenants.
And now, through the use of a National Housing Act insured mortgage, is brought within the reach of all citizens on a monthly payment.
In the midst of the New Deal, when the FDR administration is looking for ways to try to stabilize the housing market, the Fair Housing Act is passed in 1934. And as part of that, the Homeowners Loan Corporation is also established with the hope that if you could establish long-term mortgages with fixed interest rates, you could create pathways to homeownership for most Americans.
This time they can buy this house with monthly payments that are less than they now spend for rent.
Damn, you see the prices on that house, man? It said model home, $4,800, $960 cash, $27.62 a month. National Housing Act insured mortgage. That's crazy.
When the FHA starts underwriting mortgages in the 1930s, this really is a game changer in a lot of ways. It takes a lot of risk off the banks, it places it onto the federal government, and now working class, middle class families, they're able to purchase a home.
Unfortunately, as part of that, what the HOLC does is it establishes designations for neighborhoods based on the occupants of those neighborhoods.
And this is where the term redlining comes into place. The FHA, they made color-coded maps of all the largest cities in the United States, and they broke cities down into 4 different areas. Red is considered hazardous, that's the worst. Yellow is considered definitely declining. Blue is considered still desirable, and green is considered the best.
And what's so powerful?
Damn, so was this how they was determining who got their mortgages approved? So they wasn't even going based off your credit score or none of that. If you just lived in one of these areas that they colored out on the map like a goddamn coloring contest, then you got your mortgage approved based on if you lived in A, B, C, or D. Was it even about your credit score? That's crazy.
Powerful about this kind of scale of measuring investment, it was about values and people.
The fact of the matter is that there was no evidence that those people who lived in those communities, predominantly black and brown people and foreign-born people, would have defaulted on loans.
There are no firm realities behind the close proximity to blackness and your property values.
That's crazy, bro. I'm looking at this map right here, right? So the blue was a go. The red was the most hazardous. And it looks like that red, that's where the black people live at. So it looks like the black people live in an area right in the middle between 2 white areas. So on this side of them is more white people, and on that side of them is more white people. And all the black people live right here in the middle of the map, and they get marked red, but everybody around them is blue and a little bit of yellow. And you notice that the yellow is always close to where the red is at. That's crazy. There's more yellow where the red is.
Going down. That's just not true.
The FHA is being very upfront and very explicit in how they're linking spatial desirability with racial occupancy. It's this racialization of space idea. So areas that were predominantly African American or majority minority, or really in a lot of cases, even if there's a few non-white people there, that's often enough to be redlined. So when they built these maps, they also explained why each area got the ranking it did.
The area around 4th Avenue South, which is called the Old South Side. This was a nice area, had nice homes. It's the historic African-American neighborhood on the south side of Minneapolis.
This one part of South Minneapolis was redlined specifically due to, and I'm quoting, a gradual infiltration of Negroes and Asiatics.
Wow.
The FHA refused to give an area a green-lined designation. Again, this is the best designation that they'll offer unless, and I'm quoting again, restrictive covenants are already in place. That line's from the FHA underwriting manual. Racial covenants aren't just about discriminating against people of color. It's about enriching white people. And I think that's the part that often gets lost in this narrative. And I think it does speak to the ways that white supremacy have been embedded in really built structures and built environments.
Damn. So, I mean, he just really said it right there. The racism, white supremacy is built structures and it's built environments. It's systematic, man. Like, you're gonna hear that a lot. Systematic racism. Systematic racism. There's a system that's in place that's racist against blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans. The system that's in place, the same system that builds up our oppressor, is the same system that pushes us down and keeps us on the bottom. Only way to fix it is to destroy the damn system, man. Or to flip the system on its head. That's the only way you fix it.
I mean, if your grandparents bought a home on Minnehaha Creek, you know, that home's worth, what, $500,000? If your grandparents rented an area that was redlined and then subsequently destroyed by a freeway project, you know, you're not inheriting anything.
In a lot of ways, the practice of redlining, which didn't start until the 1930s, institutionalized and spread racial covenants all over the country because suddenly developers got sanctioned, they got direction from the federal government saying, this is best practices if you want to have a really high rating from us, if you want to get the most favorable terms for any loans.
By kind of de-integrating Minneapolis, which in many ways is what racial covenants are doing, this set the stage and enabled all these subsequent systems of inequality to really take hold.
This very persistent myth that northern cities.
That paper said, Negroes not welcome.
These never had formal segregation. The South had Jim Crow, and look at those signs. Well, racial covenants did the work of Jim Crow in the North, all over the North.
Many whites simply were not aware that there was a segregation. So many people in Minneapolis would be outraged what they thought that their friend was being discriminated against. They knew something was happening, but it wasn't happening to your friend. That was what kind of this mixed kind of a situation that we had in Minneapolis. I mean, if you could imagine these people, their parents sent me cookies and, you know, cakes all during the war. And I was welcome in their house. There was no question about it. And then there's other people who were just absolutely Klansmen. You know, that was what Minneapolis was all about. But that was my generation in Minneapolis.
It's crazy, right? So that brother, he's talking about his white friends that, you know, they gave him cookies and you know what I mean, all kind of great things. But then he said that there were other white people that was just absolute Klansmen. So what you have to understand is the same people that's nice, smiling in your face and giving you cookies, they're benefiting from the same system that the absolute Klansmen are benefiting from. That same system that keeps you on the bottom.
We were hemmed in that ghetto, and that was our life. That was our world.
The 1935 land use planning map used to define which place would get mortgages versus others circled these areas, called them slums, places where the quote-unquote Negroes live. These are places to avoid.
The slums.
Right? So they're going to give you substandard housing and they're going to contain you.
Keep in mind, these documents that they showing, these are HUD documents. These are federal documents that the housing and urban development was using in order to give loans and resources to build communities for people. They showing you the document and it has slums on it. Slum, Negro section. They ain't approving no loans over there.
Access to affordable housing was a challenge. When you think about the reasons behind the creation of public housing, we had a lot of folks forced to the low-wage sector, right? And you're thinking about what jobs or opportunities that low-income folks.
Wow. So now this is why they created Section 8. So they created the Section 8 out of them using the HUD program to basically excess out of any type of progress in building our communities. Now they turn around and they build Section 8 housing in our communities. They give us government housing, but they use the money from the government to give us government housing, but then that same money from the government, they give it to the oppressors and build them houses.
Folks of color even had access to at this time.
Diabolical.
I would argue that with the creation of public housing in 1938, the Sumner Field homes became this really interesting iteration of the redesign of space. You have 400 units of public housing, which were segregated at the time, created. In 1953, the City Council of Minneapolis refused to scatter another 1,000 units of public housing outside of the Sumner Field homes area. And where did these pressures come from? You had both internal conservative politicians and outlying suburban communities coming in saying, not in my neighborhood. And the city council crumbled under the pressure and then took what was 400 units of public housing to over 1,000 units in less than a decade. They have strategically manufactured urban poverty.
God damn, bro. Diabolical, man. They manufactured poverty. They manufactured the ghettos, man. It's what the Israelites and the ISUPK been saying since 1969, man. The condition that blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans live in, the poverty we live in, is not our fault, man. It's not our fault. They've manufactured these conditions that we live in, and it's being revealed right here.
This history is very personal for me. I'm a third generation Minneapolitan. My grandparents were immigrants from Sweden who came to this country with nothing, worked incredibly hard jobs, but both sets of my grandparents in 1942 were.
Now listen to her talk. Now I'm listening to this oppressor talk, right? And talk about how they came and they had nothing. But at the same time, them coming with nothing, there was a system that was set up that just because of who they were and the color of their skin, the system that was in place when they got here, it was going to guarantee that they end up in a better condition than we were in.
Were able to buy houses in South Minneapolis. These houses were in a part of the city that was blanketed by racial covenants. Because of those racial covenants, my parents grew up in neighborhoods that were entirely white. And in many ways, they described them as a paradise for children. They had wonderful parks. They had really solid schools that sent them to college. But no one in their neighborhood ever talked about the fact that this neighborhood was only for white people. And I want everyone with this map to imagine themselves in this landscape of privilege and disenfranchisement.
Damn. So they didn't really get into the racial covenants. I'm gonna have to say that for another video. But basically, man, just the racial covenants were things that they would write into the documents whenever they would sell a house. So if someone owned a house, they would put a racial covenant, which is something that you had to abide by in order to sell that house. And what they will put is that this house can only be sold to another white man or another white person. So you couldn't even sell the house to someone if they were not white. White people were the only one who were able to buy and sell houses, and black people, they just gave us Section 8 housing. Put you in government housing. put you in government housing on government bread, and you go work, service jobs.
All jokes aside, you know how niggas be like, I'm this and that for life, this and that for life.
You don't receive her what? Her plane! In the ISUPK, we ain't worried about the coronavirus. How many of us do you see with masks on? Right! How many of us do you see out here afraid with gloves on?
140 for the rebel. The world turned its back on me. I'm a cripple. We got soldiers, he got soldiers, but I got different.
Don't sit here and talk shit like what's gonna pop up, what's gonna do this. If you gonna cross the line, cross the fucking line. Otherwise, get the fuck out of here. Right.
Please, forgive me for the time that I did. And bring his gift, have your respect to your prince.
Nosotros somos una nación. Nosotros somos la misma gente. Nosotros.
El mundo sepa que nuestros hermanos negros y hermanos